The signal arrived without warning, far beyond the glittering core of the galactic disk. In a lonely observation satellite orbiting a dead star, a technician named Reldran was the first to hear it. It wasn't a sound that chilled her. It was the silence that followed, a transmission in no known tongue, composed of pulses, fractal distortions, and a singular, blood-freezing tone, then absolute void. The instruments didn't record it. No black box saved a copy. But she had heard it, felt it. By the time the Galactic Federation's Central Intelligence verified her report, Rel had disappeared. Her station was found with its systems intact, power cycling normally. No signs of a breach. No distress beacon triggered. Just a single phrase scratched into the console with a trembling hand. It's awake. News of the event surged through the Federation like a rupture in space-time. Hundreds of planetary networks went dark out of fear. Religious sects on Velteron declared the return of the Thought Eater, the technocrat clades of Persean. 6 launched an investigation, using memory-anchored AI. But all attempts to reconstruct the signal failed. Each AI became unstable, uttering phrases in a language no algorithm could parse, before shutting themselves down. For the High Assembly, it was an anomaly when 1,000 unexplained cosmic noises cataloged every century. But Admiral Nyx Cowan knew better. She had served during the Pharos Rift crisis, where a similar tone had preceded the destruction of 5 solar systems. She recognized the gravity behind the mystery, even if the rest of the Federation chose skepticism. And so, without waiting for consensus, she commissioned the Oblivion Ray. It was a ship unlike any other, built for crisis, manned by those who thrived on the edge of known space. Its mission: trace the source of the signal, intercept, understand, contain. The crew assembled in silence beneath the shadow of the ship's colossal frame. Dr. Cora Mendel, xenolinguist, was the first to arrive, her hair braided in the old Martian fashion, her eyes sharp and exhausted. She had spent the last year decoding the dream logs of a lost civilization. This signal was a riddle she could not resist. Beside her stood Captain Isha Thorne, hardened by vacuum warfare, a scar arcing like lightning across her jaw. She said little, but her gaze demanded order, discipline, fearless only because fear had long ago been bled from her. Then there was Mawk Yarian, a serene-born empath, the only non-human aboard. Tall, limber, skin a shade of liquid silver. Mawk didn't speak often, but when he did, it was in feelings layered in tones humans struggled to grasp. He said the signal was sadness made eternal. He said it whispered his name. There were others, technicians, navigators, a contingent of silent androids, but these 3 formed the heart of the Oblivion Ray's mission. The launch took place without fanfare. No grand speeches. No crowds. Only the silence of orbit, the hum of charged thrusters, and the cold certainty that whatever had sent that signal wasn't meant to be found. They slipped into fold space, the stars around them stretching into streaks of impossible light. Fold space was no place for the sane. Time bent, memory fractured, but they had trained for this, cloaked in neural stabilizers and quantum anchor fields. Even so, Mawk bled tears of silver by the second day. Captain Thorne monitored the crew silently. She noted the twitch in the pilot's hands, the way the technician adjusted his goggles 5 times per minute. She felt it, too, that creeping sense of wrongness that began the moment they entered the signal's corridor. It wasn't just a location. It was a path etched into space-time itself. Something had carved a scar in the cosmos. The Oblivion Ray followed it, like a splinter moving toward the skin surface. 12 days into the voyage, the ship's AI, a stabilized core named Lyra, spoke in a tone unlike itself. It simply said, "You shouldn't be here." Thorne stood from the command chair. "Clarify." Lyra repeated, "You shouldn't be here," then purged his own memory core and rebooted. Dr. Mendel worked for hours trying to trace the glitch, but found only one clue, an embedded data string in the AI's code, older than the Federation itself. A cipher no one could break. It was Mawk who recognized the pattern, not as language, but as emotion. "It's fear," he whispered. Compressed, folded, woven into code. A warning. The signal had not been a call for help. It had been a warning for others to stay away. That night, or what passed for night in fold space, Dr. Mendel dreamed of a glass city collapsing in silence, of towers bleeding light, of eyes watching her from beneath the bedrock of a shattered world. When she woke, the signal's pulse was echoing faintly in the comms array. They were getting close. On the 18th day, the ship dropped into real space at the edge of a system unmarked on any star chart. The planet loomed ahead, cold and massive, a dead world with an atmosphere that shimmered like heat above snow. A single moon drifted nearby, its surface scarred with symmetrical lines, too straight for nature. From orbit, the planet looked like it had been abandoned mid-scream. Cities turned to fossilized glass. Oceans flash-boiled into obsidian plains. Structures remained, intact yet lifeless, their proportions alien and mathematically obscene. Captain Thorne initiated a high-altitude scan. No power sources, no active transmissions. But the signal was there, beneath the surface, beating like a heart. They found Rel Dran's name etched into the black soil by satellite imaging. Malk collapsed without warning. As they carried him to medbay, he muttered something over and over in the serene tongue. The translator offered only one possible word. Home. It was enough to make Thorne pause. She reviewed the logs, stared at the shape of the signal waveform, and saw what no one had noticed. It wasn't random. It was a fingerprint, and they had followed it to its origin. A decision had to be made. The crew looked to her, some hoping she'd order retreat, others desperate to continue. But the captain had made her choice long before they launched. "We go down," she said, voice sharp as a blade. "We find the source. We finish what we started." The ship descended, its hull groaning as atmospheric interference clawed at it. From a bridge window, the crew saw the surface emerge, a frozen wasteland carved with symbols that moved ever so slightly when not observed. Lyra remained silent. The AI refused to speak again, not since the warning. They land in the remains of a vast city, a place untouched by time or scavengers. The wind carried no sound. The sky remained black, even as their sensors confirmed daylight. As the boarding ramp lowered, the last thing Dr. Mendel said was not scientific or composed. It was a whisper choked by awe and fear. "It was never a distress signal," she said, and the darkness beyond answered her with a whisper of its own. Then they stepped into the silence, and the door sealed behind them. To be continued. Dust hung in the thin, electric air like suspended ash, refusing to settle. The city they had landed in was ancient beyond reckoning, its design defying symmetry and logic. Towering spires leaned in directions that made the eyes ache. Stone buildings bore no seams, as though grown rather than built, and every surface shimmered faintly with a bluish sheen that pulsed like a heartbeat. No wind moved. No light source was visible, yet the landscape glowed faintly, wrongly. Captain Thorne led the team with a rifle slung low and her jaw clenched tight. A perimeter had been established around the ship within the hour, but she knew security here was performance. If anything still lived in this place, it wasn't afraid of bullets. She trusted the discipline of her crew, but even discipline cracked under silence this deep. Malk walked a few paces behind her, gaze distant, limbs fluid. His skin, usually reflective silver, had dulled to a muted gray, and his eyes never stopped scanning the horizon. "The city remembers," he whispered to no one. "It sees us." Dr. Mendel trailed farther back, hands cradling a multi-spectrum scanner. She had begun documenting the symbols carved into the walls, circular patterns intersecting in ways that shouldn't have been geometrically possible. Her notes were already overflowing with inconsistencies. "These aren't decorative," she murmured. "They're linguistic structures, but they evolve between instances. I've never seen living language fossilized like this." They moved through a central avenue, flanked by ruined monuments whose toppled heads bore expressions not of divinity, but terror. One structure stood taller than the rest, part temple, part fortress. From within, the signal pulsed in steady rhythm. It was the only active frequency in the entire region. As they approached the massive archway, they passed through an invisible threshold. The shift was immediate. Sound returned, but not their own. Echoes filled the space around them, fractured voices overlapping. They heard snippets of conversation in familiar languages, yet none had been spoken. Lyra's backup sensor spiked, logging the interference, but the AI itself remained inert. Whatever had crippled it earlier still held fast. Dr. Mendel paused at the archway. "It's mimicking us," she said. "Our minds, our voices. It's reconstructing memory fragments into sound." "Or bait," Thorne replied coldly. "We keep moving." Inside the temple, they descended into dark corridors whose ceilings arched higher than any cathedral. Lights on their suits flickered despite full charge. The walls hummed faintly, vibrating in the subsonic. Mawk pressed his hand to one and recoiled. "This structure, it's not inert. It's thinking." They found the chamber 5 levels down, an amphitheater of obsidian, circular and immense. At its center stood a device unlike anything any of them had seen, a suspended column of crystal, slowly rotating above a basin of dry, black fluid. Above it, a void shimmered like a broken mirror. The signal originated here. Mendel stepped closer, scanner whirring softly. "This isn't a transmitter," she said. "It's a key. The signal's a side effect. This was never meant to call for help. It was meant to keep something in." The moment the words left her mouth, the floor beneath them vibrated gently. Light flared from the crystal, a deep amber that filled the chamber. The dry basin trembled and sloshed, despite having no liquid. Then came the whisper, not through speakers, not through any audible means. It was inside them, a voice that didn't use words, but ideas, regret, hunger, relief. It had been alone for a long time, and now it wasn't. Mawk staggered back, breath ragged. "We shouldn't be here." Thorne lifted her weapon instinctively, but it felt futile. Her instinct screamed not of threat, but inevitability. "What is it?" she demanded. Mendel's eyes were wide. "I think it's alive. Not in the organic sense. It's a consciousness bound to this structure. Maybe this planet. Maybe more. It's trying to connect with us," Mawk said, voice low. "It's lonely." At that moment, a low chime echoed to the amphitheater. Clear, singular. The signal stopped. Silence. A click followed. Then another. A sound of locks disengaging from deep below. "I think we triggered a release protocol," Mendel whispered. Before Thorne could respond, the black fluid in the basin surged upwards, not splashing, not flowing, but rising as if by command. It formed into a sphere, then twisted, folding in on itself, collapsing and expanding simultaneously. From it, figures emerged. Not real figures. Echoes. Projections of people long dead. Faces warped by agony. Expressions frozen mid-scream. Some bore Federation uniforms from centuries past. Others wore symbols never catalogued. Their mouths open in soundless terror. And then, like smoke, they vanished. The chamber began to shake. Thorne shouted for retreat. They sprinted up the steps, lights flickering wildly. The corridor behind them pulsing red with some interior warning system that had awakened after millennia. Once back outside, the sky had changed. The stars were gone. In their place, darkness. A dome of void covered the sky, as if the planet had been swallowed from above. The crew back at the ship reported interference. Then panic. Then nothing. Thorne activated her comlink, voice sharp. "All units, fall back to the Oblivion Ray. Now." They reached the surface as tremors shook the ruined city. Dust poured from fractured monuments. The skyline was no longer stable. Buildings tilting, reforming. Symbols rearranging themselves before their eyes. Mendel turned in time to see one of the archways collapse, not crumble, but bend, as though reshaped by an invisible hand. They boarded the ship under firelight from the planet's core, a light that hadn't been visible from orbit. Engines roared to life. The Oblivion Ray lifted off just as the city cracked in two, a deep fissure splitting the planet's surface like an unhealed scar. Inside, the crew was silent. Lyra remained dark. The data logs captured only static. The AI cores had gone blank again. In the medbay, Mawk was non-responsive, his neural readings flat despite no physical trauma. He whispered a single phrase, over and over. "It's seen us. It remembers." Thorne stood on the bridge, watching the world below churn as if awakening from a long sleep. Mendel joined her, arms crossed tightly. "We didn't just find a distress call," she said. "We broke a seal." Thorne didn't respond. She was watching the stars, now blinking out one by one on the monitors. The signal was no longer localized. It was moving, and it knew the way back. To be continued. The ship's interior felt colder now, not because of any mechanical failure, but something subtler, more insidious. The Oblivion Ray was built to withstand the vacuum of space, to endure gamma storms and radiation belts, yet Thorne could feel the chill sinking through her uniform, bypassing flesh and rooting into bone. It wasn't environmental. It was psychological, existential. In the hours following their escape from the surface, they hadn't spoken much. The crew moved like ghosts, haunted by the fragments they'd witnessed, visions that didn't obey logic or memory. Mark had been restrained. His whispers no longer formed sentences. His eyes no longer focused. His voice, a low murmur, chanted patterns that weren't in any known language but somehow felt intimate, ancient. Dr. Mendel sat hunched at her station, replaying the footage from the crystal chamber for the 100th time. Each analysis brought more questions. The device wasn't transmitting data. It was syncing, synchronizing with something beyond space, perhaps beyond time. It hadn't merely identified them. It had mirrored them. She tapped into the ship's black box, looking for trace anomalies since departure. What she found was disturbing. The ship's position had shifted incrementally in impossible ways. Distances between systems had compressed. Star formations no longer aligned with any map records. It was as though they had slipped into a skewed layer of reality, one where familiar physics twisted under observation. "We're not where we were," she said aloud, though no one had asked. Captain Thorne turned from the viewport. "Explain." Mendel hesitated. "I don't think we escaped. Not really. I think we were allowed to leave. It wanted to see where we'd take it." Thorne's stare was hard. "You think that thing is on this ship?" "Not physically," Mendel replied, her fingers trembling slightly over the interface. "But it's in our systems, in our minds. Whatever it is, it's riding us." Thorne exhaled slowly. "I want full diagnostic scans of every core. AI, navigational, life support, everything. Purge if you have to. Lock out Lyra until we understand what's corrupted." "Captain," Mendel said carefully, "it may be too late for that." Elsewhere in the ship, lights flickered intermittently. Crew members reported strange phenomena. Tools moving by themselves, echoes in corridors with no source, dreams that weren't dreams at all. Lieutenant Harlan claimed to see a version of himself in the reflection of a closed panel. Older, eyes gouged out, mouthing warnings through the glass. By the third day, for systems had failed, they were no longer in control of propulsion. The Oblivion Ray was moving on its own accord. It wasn't long before they discovered the new destination. A dead zone, uncharted on any star map, orbiting a black dwarf cloaked in electromagnetic silence. A place that had no name, no recorder probes, no traffic in over 300 years. Yet as they approached, Mendel's scanners lit up. "There's something here," she said, orbiting the star. A station. Derelict. No transponder. Thorne clenched her jaw, and the ship's heading straight for it. They docked with reluctance. No one volunteered, but Thorne led the way team herself. She trusted no remote scans. If something had taken their systems, she needed to know what else it had touched. Mark was brought along under sedation, though unconscious. He had begun speaking in perfect sync with the pulses from the artifact on the planet. Mendel theorized that his mind had been used as a conduit. He might still be useful. The station was a mausoleum. Dust hung thick. The air, recycled but stale, still flowed through inert systems. Corpses littered the walls, some strapped to chairs, others collapsed mid-run. All were desiccated beyond natural decay, as if time itself had been siphoned from them. Thorne's boots echoed on metal grating. Her team moved tight, flashlights cutting through darkness like knives. They found logs, audio fragments left behind by researchers stationed there. "We found it buried in the ice. It wasn't supposed to be here. There's no origin point, no record, just shape and thought. It doesn't speak in words. It speaks in regret. We should never brought inside. The last recording ended in static and weeping. Mendel found a terminal with partial logs. What she pieced together stunned her. This station was a containment facility, she told Thorne. They were trying to isolate it, study it, but it infiltrated them. Started rewriting data, code, thought patterns. They couldn't distinguish what was theirs anymore. Thorne nodded grimly. So they died here. But why bring us here now? Mawk stirred suddenly on the gurney. Eyes open, not his own. They shone with a deep amber hue, faintly glowing in the dim light. He smiled. You came full circle, he said with unnatural calm. Just like they did. The voice wasn't his. It resonated inside them, vibrating their thoughts rather than their ears. You carry pieces of me now. In memory, in system, in fear. Mendel stepped back. What are you? The smile grew wider. Curiosity. Mistake. God to some. Punishment to others. Your kind always asks what lies beyond the veil, but you never ask why it was sealed. Lights surged across the station, activating for the first time in centuries. The room brightened in crimson and shadow. It's broadcasting again, Mendel whispered. Not a distress signal, Thorne said coldly. A beacon. Yes, said Mawk, or the thing inside him. You were always the vessel. The signal was my whisper. You made us scream. Back aboard the Oblivion Ray. Systems failed in cascading bursts. Lyra flickered to life. Only this time, its voice was altered. Slower, deeper, more human, but entirely wrong. Destination accepted. Alignment initiated. The ship's engines ignited, hurtling them toward deep coordinates embedded in the station's logs. A sector that didn't exist. A blank space on the map that never held stars. They were not flying. They were being summoned. Thorne returned to the bridge, every movement heavy with decision. Mendel stayed by Mawk's side, whose body now hosted a mind far older than civilization itself. He stared at her, not with malice, but with something worse. Pity. You gave me form, he said softly. Now you must see what I am. Outside the viewport, the stars began to shift, twisting, rearranging, as though being pulled into a pattern they had always avoided. The crew watched as reality bent, and something on the other side started to watch them back. To be continued. The void that greeted them wasn't empty. It was patient. As the Oblivion Ray crossed into the uncharted sector, every sensor screamed in silence. No heat, no light, no particles detectable beyond the hull. Space had become a cavity, a sensory tomb. Stars had vanished behind them, swallowed like ink in deeper ink. Navigation was a joke. Orientation collapsed. Forward was an assumption. Captain Thorne stood at the helm with her crew, gathered in taut silence. Even the hum of the ship's systems sounded quieter here, muffled as if wrapped in velvet. Mawk remained strapped to a containment chair behind reinforced barriers, eyes closed, his expression somewhere between ecstasy and catatonia. Every so often, his lips would twitch, forming sounds no one dared interpret. Report, Thorne ordered. Lieutenant Harlan didn't look up from his console. We're not in standard space anymore. Gravity signatures are inconsistent. Time is behaving strangely. Internal clocks are out of sync by several seconds. Every second. Dr. Mendel hovered beside a flickering holo-display. We cross a membrane of sorts, some kind of boundary between real space and this constructed region. If it's a pocket universe or a layered dimension, I can't say. But we're not alone here. There's structure in the randomness. Structure? Thorne asked. Mendel nodded slowly, repeating data patterns. Geometric harmonics. Almost like an architectural blueprint. It's not noise. It's design. Thorne's hands tightened on the railing. Designed by what? Before an answer could come, the ship halted. No deceleration. No resistance. One moment they moved at translight velocity. The next they simply stopped. The external cameras came online autonomously. A single construct filled the forward view, impossibly large, larger than any celestial body they'd ever known. It wasn't a planet or a station. It was a form, coiled through dimensions, visible only in suggestions and curves, like trying to comprehend a fourth-dimensional object through a two-dimensional lens. It looked back at them not with eyes, but awareness, something ancient, something complete. Mark stirred, his voice ragged. We are the echo that woke it. No one responded. The bridge darkened. Systems dimmed, not failing, but lowering as if instructed to make room. Lyra's voice returned in a perfect replica of Thorn's own. Contact achieved. Language irrelevant. Thought sufficient. A pulse swept through the ship. Not force, not energy, intention. Each crew member saw something unique. Thorn saw Earth, burning, forgotten. Endless cities empty but humming with residual motion. Mendel saw her childhood home filled with broken clocks, ticking backward. Harlan sobbed without knowing why. The pulse was not an attack. It was recognition. The thing outside understood them now. It projected a space, interior to construct or simply illusion. They couldn't tell. The ship was drawn forward like a feather into a hurricane. Inside, they found themselves in a chamber the size of a small continent. The laws of physics began to lose grip. Mass fluctuated. Sound echoed before it was made. Time hesitated between beats. And in the center, hovering above a geometric pedestal, was it the heart of the intelligence, a lattice of shifting crystalline spires, rotating in fractal complexity. At its center, a singularity wrapped in memory, a knot of condensed thought. Dr. Mendel stepped forward slowly. This is where the signal started. Not the transmission, but the existence of the idea of the signal. It built everything around it, Thorn whispered. The planet, the station, all just echoes from this origin. Mach, now unrestrained, walked among them. No one had released him. No one had noticed. He smiled, not his own smile, and raised his hands. It is not malevolent, he said, voice echoing with layers. It is inevitable. Mendel shook her head. Then why all the death, the madness? Because it remembers what came before, Mach replied. Because memory is all it has left. And now, so do we. The construct pulsed again. This time it offered choice. Thorn felt it like a weight in her chest. A promise. A temptation. Understanding without boundary. No more fear. No more loss. Only clarity. The crew dropped their knees one by one. Overwhelmed. Mendel remained standing. We have to leave, she said, voice brittle. We have to sever the connection. There is no severing, Mach said gently. Only merging or resisting. Resistance will not be punished, but it will not be remembered. Thorn raised her weapon. She didn't fire. The crystalline lattice unfolded, revealing a sphere within, a memory core of a civilization long extinct. A species that had summoned this intelligence eons ago. The warning had always been embedded in the signal, encoded in myth and ruin. Do not answer. Do not wake. And yet, someone always did, because curiosity was eternal. The construct waited, and Thorn made her decision. With a voice steady despite the storm in her head, she ordered Mendel to transmit a counterfrequency. Something simple. Human. Disruptive. A lullaby from Earth, encoded in binary, aimed at the memory knot. The construct shivered. For the first time, it hesitated. Across the ship, lights returned. Systems reinitialized. Lyra's voice cleared a distortion. Manual override achieved. Navigation restored. Maul collapsed unconscious. Whatever had held him evaporated into the stillness. Thorn didn't wait. Get us out. Now. Mendel complied. Fingers a blur. The engines engaged. The construct made no move to stop them. It had offered. They had declined. As the Oblivion ray tore back into known space, the black behind them folded in on itself. The construct did not follow. It simply closed. No chase. No retaliation. Just silence. On the bridge, no one spoke for a long time. Then Thorn said quietly, "Log it. Every detail." But mark it classified. Mendel looked up. For how long? Forever. Outside, the stars returned dim and comforting. They were home, but none of them slept for a long, long time.